Hi Travis, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today. Firstly, the FA Youth Cup returns on Tuesday and the team gets the opportunity to play Old Trafford once again. What's the mood like around the dressing room and is everybody excited?
Yeah, I think the lads are naturally excited. Some of them have played in the competition before, but for the majority it will be their first time. For some it will be the first time playing at Old Trafford. So what comes with that is obviously an excitement, an apprehension. The Youth Cup and the history of it at this football club brings with it a unique interest and expectation. So yeah, the lads have got to work through that over these next few days. But as I've said to previous interviews, we've got to try and just keep it as normal as possible. There's enough noise around it without us adding to it unduly. So our preparations will be as they have been for all the league games, and Adam and Co done a fantastic job, and they'll just try and keep it as normal as possible.
And your role as head of player development and coaching of the academy is very important. What are your day-to-day responsibilities and how does that impact the future of our young players here at the academy?
Yeah, so I oversee the players from like 16 to, let's say, 20, 21 years old. My ultimate responsibility is to try and give the boys a smooth enough in transition to the first team or senior football as possible. I'm not too sure this industry, anything's that smooth. But yeah, trying to give them the tools to make that step. Very few, if you look at Alejandro and Kobe, they've kind of gone route one. We call route one going from under 18s, 21 straight into our first team, so they've not had to go out of the building. That's pretty unique in the industry and doesn't happen too often, but at this football club it happens probably more than most, which is great. But day to day, it's making sure that the lads' program's right. I oversee the under 21s team with Dave Hughes, Adam and Colin. They oversee the 18s, but we're very close to the staff every day, and the players regularly go across both sort of training groups, both age groups, and the players train with the first team regularly as well. So it's just trying to plan and plot the development of those players, giving them the right experiences and the right programme to ultimately get to our first team or senior football as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fans are so excited to see the talent coming through because Man United is so renowned for having youth players making it into the first team. But how would you describe the philosophy and values that guide the youth development programme at Manchester United?
So it's one of opportunity. So opportunity has to be earned, but what this football club has demonstrated for an unprecedented amount of time is if you are good enough, you will get the opportunity. That's not the case at all football clubs. So the principles and values behind that is we want players to be relentless in their approach to getting better, have that humility to understand that the opportunity that they're getting, that they're fortunate, and to respect each other, respect what's gone before us, respect the staff, and just ensure that they're maximising this fantastic opportunity they've got. And that goes for the staff as well. So yes, there's a lot of technical and tactical and athletic development that goes in, but I genuinely believe the biggest part of development for young people and young players is that we develop the mentality and that psychological sort of corner of their development that ultimately, like, you get to a level in the game where everyone can run, everyone can deal with the ball, everyone understands the game. Well, what makes the difference? The difference is how much they want to be successful and how much they're willing to give to be successful, and how long they're willing to do that for. So we see players across the industry that make 5 first-team games, 10 first-team games, and then sometimes by the age of 25, they drop 3 divisions or they're out of the game. So we want to produce players that last a long time in the game and play at the highest level that they're capable of playing. And that, for me, is success.
It's really interesting to kind of hear the story behind that. And Erik ten Hag spoke multiple times saying that you're not just given the opportunity because you're a youth player, you do have to earn it. So leading on from that, how involved is Erik ten Hag in the academy and what relationship do you have with him and what differences has he made since he came into the club regarding the youth team and the youth players?
Yeah, so I think obviously the manager set out very early in terms of what his expectations were, in terms of standards, and that there would be no sweeties given out, there'll be no easy debuts, and that's definitely been the case. Like we've not had loads of debuts since the manager come in, but I think the ones we've had have been earned, and the players that have got those opportunities have taken them generally, and he makes a big point of they've earned that really through their training performances. So their attitude every day has to be spot on. Training's hard, so as it should be, and I'm sure it is at all clubs, but the lads have to deal with the physical demands, the technical demands, the tactical demands put upon them. So if they do get a chance, they have earned it, and I think that's the greatest thing you can have in life, that nothing's given to you, it's got to be earned. In terms of daily input, we have players training with the first team almost every day, so I wouldn't class, so the likes of a Dangor or a Radek Vitek, they're not academy players anymore. They've been with the first team for 6 months, 12 months, so they're not with us. You know, and they might play some games for the under-21s because they need to play games, but they're not with us. So when I say players are training with the first team every day, I'm on about players that are still academy players that haven't made that transition. So every day there's players with them. But in terms of contact with Eric, like we can speak to the manager whenever we want, but he's busy and he's got a lot on. So daily conversations happen with Darren Fletcher, Mitchell, and Eric Ramsey. And then obviously the goalkeeping staff will speak to Morse and Rich Artis on a daily basis. So there's really a healthy sort of conversation. Players are spoken about regularly, and our job and my job is to ensure that the players get the best opportunities. So I have to have those conversations to ensure that what we're doing for the players is right. But the first team staff care about the younger players and want to do the right thing by them. So it's easy for me, really.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that there's such a good relationship, and Manchester United have such a long-standing record of having a homegrown player in every matchday squad, which spans over 85 years now. How important is that for you and the staff to continue that record?
There'll be some effort on my watch for that to stop, so hopefully it doesn't. But yeah, so that heritage and that history is so important. But we have to ensure that the next player is ready to make that transition. So my driver and the staff's driver is to ensure that we've got the next one and the next one and the next one, because ultimately our job is now done with an Alejandro Garnacho or a Kobe Mainu. It's the next ones, and they need to be as good as them. And that's not easy. It's not easy for the players. It's not easy for the staff. So we have to work smart and hard to ensure that the players are ready and progressing. And yeah, that's a challenge.
And what role does the academy play in integrating young players into the first team squad? And we spoke about that a little bit, but I mean, like, do you see a young talent and think, that is a talent that I think that can make it into the first team squad? And do you put together a specific plan for that player, knowing that hopefully that they can make it there?
Yeah, so we talked about my role earlier. That is my role, really, along with making sure the under-21s are competitive and play the right way. And Dave does a hell of a lot of that, and he's excellent. My job is that. So along with Darren Fletcher, along with Nick Cox, making sure that plans are put in place for our players. There's plans in place for all the players, but obviously some players at different times show more potential than others, and their performances reflect that. And I think at the point performances match potential, you're really onto something. So a player's journey is full of potential, and you go, right, we've got this plan in place. Plans need to be revised. Injuries happen. Players progress quicker or slower than what you might have predicted or hoped. And it's making sure that we're agile with that, and making sure that everybody's on board with the plan, including the player, including the parent, including agents. Everyone plays a part in it. We're kidding ourselves if we think it's just us and the players now. There's multiple stakeholders involved, and we need to make sure everyone's on board and on the same page. So yeah, lots of planning, lots of reflecting, lots of hair along the way. We have fantastic jobs, but they are challenging, and we don't get everything right. But we're trying to get as much right as we can.
Challenging, but I can imagine quite rewarding when it is successful. But I wanted to move on next. Obviously, you talked about that a slight bit there, but how do you balance the emphasis on player development, but then also achieving competitive success at the youth level?
Yeah, so the Youth Cup is a great measure of that. So we're in the Youth Cup to win the Youth Cup. We're in every game to win that game. The difference with the Youth Cup and the EFL Trophy is we put teams out to win. The players that are playing in that game will develop through the opportunity of playing. The players that don't play in that game will develop because there's a reason they're not playing, and they have to acknowledge that and be ready to make an impact or improve each day and in the weeks that pass to get in the team for the next game, should we be fortunate enough to progress. So yeah, there's lots of learning around it. My job is to ensure that the teams we put out are not to the detriment of our best young players developing. And I feel that we're good at that. That's not to say we're going to win every game that we play. We don't. And it's not to say that we get every team selection right to ensure we got the right players on the pitch. But as long as we're open-minded and we reflect on what we're doing, and there's a greater thing at play, and that is to produce players and not to just win games of football, then as long as we've got all staff thinking along those lines, we've got very experienced staff, we will get it right more than we get it wrong.
And in what ways does the youth development programme, has it evolved over the years, and what challenges have you faced in adapting to the changes in football and the changes in football trends? Because I know obviously football is changing all the time, especially when it comes to young players. So how do you adapt and overcome those things, and what's changed at the club to kind of modernise to the new world we're in? Because as you said, there's so many other parties involved now as well.
Yeah, I think it's like you've said there, there's more noise around players, whether that's a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old or a first team regular. The scrutiny, the expectation on all our players and the staff is higher. So that's normal now, but it's different from the past. So educating players around the expectations is a big part of our job. And just making sure that we do the right things and are consistent in our approach. I think that's key. But in terms of the football club, I think the football club's been consistent for a long time. Staff changes, but we've got long-standing staff as well that remind you of what went before. I think it's important to know what went before and what was successful, but equally understand that things do move on. And I think that's the biggest challenge for us, is appreciating our past, respecting it, but also continuing to move forward and strive to progress and be better.
And how does Manchester United ensure the holistic development of young players, both on and off the pitch? And obviously, players, is so important to keep them grounded. You know, there's so many changes now in football, and sometimes you see that with what comes from the outside, maybe in certain cases players can get carried away, in certain places players are just completely focused. How do you balance that with each individual is obviously completely different?
Yeah, I think recognising what your last sentence there is key. So we have to be consistent with our approach. We have to be consistent to treat players with the same standards, because if we treat players differently, then that is a recipe for disaster. But appreciate they're all on their own journey. They're all coming from different levels of maturity. They've been in the building for different amounts of time. That's the key. And I think the experience of the staff is what makes that work. But like you say, knowing individuals and planning with them their own development is everything. So consistency, knowing individuals on a personal level, not just as players, and being mindful that we can't treat all players the same. Those days have gone. But the players understanding what they've got to do, that's everything. Like, I feel like a broken record saying this. Like, yes, there's all the outside noise. Yes, there's great interest and expectation upon them. But the sooner players can understand who they are, what they got to get better at, where they're at on their journey, and just committing themselves every day to getting better, the sooner a player can do that, the sooner they will get where they need to get to. The longer they take to do that, they possibly don't get where they should get to, or it will be a more painful journey to get there than it needs to be. So yeah, that's my big thing with the players and the staff at the minute.
It sounds like quite a close-knit group, which is obviously nice to hear. But what talents are you excited to come through this crop of players? Obviously, the players that are going to be playing on Tuesday night against Derby County in the FA Youth Cup. What talents are you excited about? Are you excited about this group of players? Do you see a lot of potential in them?
Yeah, it's an exciting group. We do not highlight individuals. I don't think that's helpful. I think there's enough expectation on our young players. You will know and speak of certain players. That's your guys' job, not mine. When they become Alejandro or Cobby or Scott McTominay, then that's probably the time to talk about them a little bit more, because they are being successful and they're playing at elite level. Until you get to that point, any noise or sort of unnecessary attention, I don't think is helpful, because the players have enough pressure on them to get better every day and enough expectation to put upon themselves without additional focus, should we say.
So moving on from that, how pleasing is it to see the likes of Alejandro Garnacho, Kobe Mainu regularly featuring in the first team domestically and in Europe? And I want to ask you, what did they do to progress for the first team? And what did they do to stand out from the rest? Obviously, you've got the likes of Dan Goring and around it as well, but you would say Garnacho and Kobe are the ones that are playing very regularly right now.
Yeah, so I think there's levels, isn't there? So I think if you look at our players, so Scott McTominay has been very good and has genuinely established himself. Cobby, Alejandro is on that journey and he's further on than Cobby, but he's not there yet. So he's got more to do. So every performance he puts in is exciting, but he'll want to be more consistent, and he's becoming more consistent. Cobby's got to play more often and keep his place in the side to kick on towards being closer to the level of a Garnacho, who's now in the team, and it's his place to lose. And then a Dangor is aspiring to be a Cobby, to be a genuine first team member who's in what appears every squad now. So that, what I'm trying to get there, there's 4 academy graduates that have all featured, but they're all at different places in establishing themselves. So yeah, and I, it's nice that Cobby and Alejandro are playing, but you want them to play and kick on and establish themselves and become the best they can be, and they're not at that point yet. So although we should be proud of them and excited about what they can go on to achieve, like with all our players, we've got to expect them to achieve. I don't think it's enough to just go, oh, they're there, they've made the step up. They've now got to become part of a winning first team, and we've got to do more within the academy. So when they get there, they've got the tools to survive and kick on within that environment as quickly as they can.
I mean, they definitely seem like players with a lot of potential, so hopefully we can see that happen. But I wanted to ask you, how important is the scouting process in identifying and recruiting promising young talents into the academy? Because, as you said, every player has a different journey, but as you can see in the squad there, you know, Kobe's come up through the ranks, Alejandro came in from abroad. So the scouting process is different for each player, but how important is that?
Yeah, it's so important. So I think there's a danger sometimes as coaches, twofold. So you can pat yourself on the back and say, well, we made him the player. It's nonsense. Like, you just play a part in that player getting to where they get to. And then I think in a recruitment, sometimes you can underestimate the amount of coaching that goes in. So for me, the two departments are one department. We work together to identify players, retain players, and develop players. So they're the three parts of it: identify, retain, and develop. And recruitment's everything. It's so important that you identify the best young players and you're able to recruit the best young players. So yeah, we need to continue doing that well, and we need to get better at that as well.
And you personally, what qualities do you believe are crucial for a young player to succeed, not only as an athlete, which is really important, but as a professional and responsible individual at a club like Manchester United, that is obviously one of the biggest clubs in the world and has got such a big reputation?
Desire and drive. They're the two things for me. You're identified to come into this building because you've got ability. Ultimately, where you get to will depend on how much you want to sacrifice to get there and how long you're willing to do that for, and taking feedback, reflect on your own performance. So yeah, that sort of mentality side of it for me is what I look for, because if you're in this building, you're a good player. We want to be better players and we want to recruit even better players, but what makes them stand out and what dictates how far they get is how much they want it and how much they're willing to sacrifice to progress.
I think that's a brilliant message to send across to all young players. And when you look across back over the course of successful Manchester United players, one thing they all have in common is a very strong mentality. So I think that's a great message. But obviously it's great for players at this age to play in front of a crowd, not something that they always get to do. But how important will the home fans be in the FA Youth Cup on Tuesday night?
Well, I experienced it 2 years ago. Going through each round, we was fortunate to play 5 of our 6 games at Old Trafford, and the fans on the evening of the final were unbelievable. And as I said at the time, I don't think there's another club that can do that. So they're going to play a big part. Ultimately, though, the players will have to deliver, and they want to feed off the energy of the crowd, but they've got to create their own energy and they've got to create their own performances individually as a team. And ultimately, Derby will be a tough game. They're a good side, and Youth Cup nights bring out different emotions in people, so you got to control that. And yeah, so it's special to play at Old Trafford. It's special to play in front of a crowd. We appreciate that, but the players have to deliver, and they'll have to deliver themselves.
And we have great memories there, as we can see behind when you were managing the team. I was there that night. It was a great night. But thank you very much for speaking for us today, and we wish you all the best for the future at this great club and on Tuesday night. And for anybody that is listening at home, tickets are available on the Manchester United website, and hopefully we get a great turnout. But Travis, thank you very much.
No, thank you as well.